All right, so tomatoes are one of the easiest things to grow if you grow it correctly. So we're just going to go over the basics from seed to saving seeds, um, so that everyone can have a plentiful and successful tomato. All right, so tomatoes are one of the easiest things to grow.
Yeah, shut up.
I think I just got in a time loop. Um, so tomatoes were starting in baggies. A few weeks ago, I did uh, snow peas in baggies, and those are the ones that are actually out in my garden right now, and they haven't died yet. So snow peas are my canary in the garden, I guess you'd say. I put once tulips are out and I start to see things coming up, I'll throw out some of my snow peas, basically to just test the water to see what's up. And if they freeze, then I know I should be careful if they start looking wilty. But tomatoes are going to be the same process of putting a piece of paper into a Ziploc bag with the seeds on it and TP covering the entire thing. So we'll go over that one more time because I love tomatoes. I love saving tomatoes. I love growing tomatoes. I usually end up with way too many tomato starts. So for anybody who likes tomatoes, I'll hook you up. Oh my gosh. Celery, which I actually had the best luck with celery. Not only did it grow to, usable, mostly being used for celery for Bloody Marys for the most part, but if you just let a celery plant grow, well, first I thought it was parsley, but I mixed my plant up. So instead of parsley, sage, rosemary, and thyme, it was celery, sage, rosemary, and thyme. That thing grew into a bush that was like 3 feet tall, something like that, like big and bushy. I mean, it still looked like celery, but I'd take little sections off of it and throw it into stock. And it wasn't really edible, but it was perfect for stock because it had a really strong celery flavor, but it would only take like one half of one stalk. And you could use it to stir a Bloody Mary, but oh my lord, it would overpower it if you tried to bite into it. So celery is a really nice one to have for fresh garnish, and it is one of the aromatic vegetables, I think is what Julia called it. Celery, carrot, and onion. So it's a really good basic one for cooking, but get one of the bags or one of the bunches, it's always too much. But if you grow it yourself, you just get as much as you need, and you always have plenty for beverages or for the stock pot, which is it's always really good for that. It also freezes really, really well. It doesn't dry well at all. It's really horrible. Herbs and flowers generally grow the same. Yeah, actually, herbs and flowers grow exactly the same, but because you're trying to get the exact opposite out of the two of them, I'm putting those together as a lesson. Because yeah, it's really interesting because they grow the same, but on the herbs you want the leaves, on the flowers you want the flowers. So a lot of that comes from how you place them and how you water them. That's pretty much how you manipulate those two. So let's get started actually on this one because that one's going to be pretty easy to explain because you have a flower that started as a seed and you have an herb that started as a seed. And for the sake of brevity and correlation, I'm going with non perennial herbs. So we're talking, and not necessarily ones that won't not necessarily ones that won't continue growing year round, because I have parsley that'll come back generally. I'm not sure if it's reseeding itself necessarily or just like, okay, I'm not dead yet. But for the sake of this conversation, let's just say ones that are very much one season: basil, cilantro, that sort of thing. So and again with flowers, same thing. Not necessarily talking about perennial flowers. Generally, more along the lines talking about um, annual flowers, say marigolds, cosmos, which are really good at reseeding themselves. Which, cilantro, I always say with cilantro, I'm really good at growing um, coriander seeds, because when they bolt, that's what they create, coriander seeds. And if you let that go, then it'll reseed itself and more cilantro will grow. But so we're just going to do a quick explanation. Okay, so here we have the flower seed. I don't know if I'm switching these around, so I'm going to label them so I don't forget. And herb. Okay, so they come up. So they both get the leaves first. And the flower, you want to encourage towards that flower part. But with all herbs, as soon as it starts to get that flower part on it, you want to snip that off. Another thing with flowers, if you snipped it off to prevent that, you would have a much bushier flower, but it wouldn't be as flowerful, because flowers are bred to grow into the main thing. So if you cut that off, you get more blossoms, maybe, but it would probably just kill the plant because they're not built with enough energy to create two flower heads. Whereas herbs will just keep trying to bolt and keep trying to bolt, because damned if you can't do a plant that doesn't want to grow in the opposite direction of where you want it to go. But that's the fun of gardening. Okay, so with flowers, you don't want to cut the heads off because that's the part you're going for. Whereas with herbs, you're wanting it to split. You're wanting it to become more leaved, so you have more to eat, because you're always eating the leaves. So what you do is, as soon as you see the flowers start to come on, like with basil, it kind of has the bottom. This is a sideways, like cutaway view. Here's the stem that goes down and everything. It kind of has multiple layers of flowers that sort of taper down into a point. And this is great if you're wanting basil seeds, but we're not wanting basil seeds. This is focusing. I cannot tell on my computer. Moving more light. Let's try more light. Nope, that's less light. Ooh, that does not seem to help. Anyway, moving on. And then you'll see down here are, and this is not to scale because, well, you might have like bigger ones, bigger leaves around, but just for the sake of space and everything. Cool, trivia is on for tomorrow. For the sake of space, I'm just using small leaves to show how this works. When you do cut this off, your basil will go into two stems, which creates 6 times the leaves. Because flowers don't want to be eaten, which is why they don't taste good to humans, although deer will bite into anything because they're assholes. But herbs taste delicious to us, but for the most part, deer do not want them at all. So, that's how cultivation has worked over time. Oh, this tastes really good, so let's make more of it, and other things don't eat it, so we can make more of it, and cultivation and invasion, and we've all seen how Little Shop of Horror ends, so there you go. No, so you cut off the basil flower right at the intersection of those two leaves, right above it, being careful not to damage the structure or connection of the two leaves. So just slightly above it, and you will see two more stalks come out, and that's how you get a bushier basil. So that's how they sort of grow the same, but because you want the opposite to happen, you treat them differently. So that's just a quickie on that. Other thing, so let's call that good. Check. I'm going to be starting both the flowers and the herbs in 6 trays. These guys, the 6 trays. And I have a tray, like the holding trays. I have 3 of those that have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, a dozen. So I have 36. Oops, tricky water. I have 36 modules. I'll probably do, for the flowers, 1 to 2 6-packs each, because I have a lot of different one of those. Possibly I just won't do the cosmos right now, because I actually have some of each of those going outside, and I have plenty of lupine, so I'm not going to start any more of those, probably for spring planting. But cosmos I'm actually going to restart as soon as the ones that are starting in my yard put off flowers. But I also have some left over to possibly start as well. Okay, so that is herbs and flowers. Celery. Big thing about celery in this area, although it's getting less and less, if there's a chance of a cold wind coming through, which we do have a tendency towards, you'll get windburn on celery stalks, but it only affects the, like, let's say you have a row in your garden. Okay, forget about this. We'll work on that later. Celery. If you plant a row of celery, celery. Okay. Let's call this an upper view. The wind is going past it and then possibly crossing through the in-between. So the whole area around it can get that frostbite situation. So what you want to do instead is celery is good to think of generally as the square foot gardening, which I think it is 9 per, but I could be wrong. So I am going to actually consult my alphabetical crop chart. Look up celery and go to planting square foot. Okay, so I can do 4 in a square foot area. What that generally means with something like celery, the math on that is if you're doing a 1 square foot, you can have 1 per square foot, okay? But if you think about a 2 square foot area, and this is where you have to kind of do the special math of how to think about square foot gardening if you're going to integrate that into your gardening. And celery is perfect for this because when you plant it in a block like this, slightly more compact than what is suggested by looking at square foot gardening in a simple way, the air will move around this. And so you'll still have areas, but it'll only be of the stuff that's directly impacted by that. So if you're looking at square foot gardening, you would do 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah. But consider that if this was moved in slightly, you could get another row in there, and then the same in this direction. So instead of having 4 across, with very little loss of space, and it would actually help to seal up these gaps a bit more to insulate the stuff on the inside. And then you would get more productivity out of that space. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah. Which I'm making them too large to be in scale, but that's because they get big. And then 2 foot, you still would easily be able to reach to the middle, but you'd be able to get 25 plants into what would otherwise be a, oh, I'm doing that so badly. There we go. 1, 2, 3. I failed this test in my dyslexia test back in elementary school, where like you're supposed to draw a line, and mine like went whoop. Like, this girl has no chill. Oh, and I did 6 along that, so I'm just gonna ignore that. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so within that 2 foot space, instead of getting 16 plants, you're getting 25 plants, and all that's doing is bringing this in about a third of the distance, a quarter of the distance roughly. And then you're going to get ruffling on the outside, but then you're going to have this entire core area, which is just slightly smaller than what you would get from that. Guaranteed, well, guaranteed as much as growing goes, to not have that cold burn, because it can even happen when it's not especially cold, if in areas that are windy, and Silverton can definitely tend to be windy. So that's how I would do, and rather than doing a row, if you're growing a lot of it, I probably, for my own growing, I just do the 1 square foot with the 4 plants. I might have done 6 plants, and I think that was a little more than I needed to do, because it grows. Oh my goodness, it grows. Whew. Okay, let's go through tomatoes, because tomatoes are honestly the best thing, and I was not able to eat them last year, and I missed them, and I'm assuming that I can eat tomatoes this year. At least I hope that I can. So I'm having to rip the paper off to get it to fit where the computer set up. Okay, let's get this back to flush. And you can see the celery diagram, but whatever. Let's just go. Okay, so with tomatoes, first let me show you how I save my tomatoes. The tomatoes that I am including, in the CSA as the primary ones are a mixed heirloom varietal of tomatoes, because generally I just put about 20 tomato plants in, because I love tomatoes and I love growing tomatoes, and it's such an interesting challenge to grow tomatoes. So I figure I'm just going to get a good mix. I always get at least one of everything. And then ground cherries, which if you're not familiar, ooh, that's horrible glare. Where's that coming from? There we go. You are going to go off for a second. Is that better? Yeah, that's better. Nope, that is not better. Okay, ground cherries, if you're not familiar with ground cherries, you should be familiar with ground cherries. They're fairly easy to grow once they're established. They are perennial, and are they a perennial? I think they're a perennial. The smaller, sweeter relative of the tomatillo, ground cherries can be eaten raw or used in pies and other desserts, sauces, and preserves. I also just love dehydrating them. They taste like what cotton candy would taste like. It was a natural flavor, if that makes any culinary sense. And so they're great. I like to use dried ones in dolmas and in salads, in terrines. They're so good in terrines. And they also have a bit of a caviar, or like if you ever had that sushi with like the little eggs, they kind of have that snap because they have little seeds in them. They are phenomenal. Fruit is ripe when paper husks can be removed easily to reveal 3/4 inch yellow cherry-like fruit, approximately 70 days to maturity from transplant. Sow seeds indoors in early spring in flats or individual peat pots. Barely cover seeds with 1/16 inch fine soil. Warm carefully with warm water. Provide with plenty of bright sunlight. Transplant indoors, starting seeds indoors after all danger of frost has passed and weather has warmed considerably. Spacing, leave about 2 feet between plants in rows 3 feet apart or more. Germination 2 weeks indoors at 70 degrees. Keep soil moderately moist during germination. Grow as you would tomatoes in sunny locations, fairly rich, well-drained soil. Ground cherry is slow to develop but produces abundantly later in season. A unique addition to your vegetable garden, providing a cage or trellis support or allowed to sprawl along ground on clean, dry mulch. I put some in last year, but I don't know if they're coming back this season because, 2020. Ugh. So I definitely wanted to get these this year because I am just addicted to them. They are so freaking delicious. And with the tomatoes, I couldn't eat tomatoes at all last year. But hopefully this year it'll be good because I love to do sauces and preserves and all sorts of stuff. And these are kind of the basics. So I don't know. Let me check the size. The ground cherries that I put in last year were actually given to me as little seedlings from a friend who dug them up from her yard because they were apparently taking over this area. And so I put them in my yard, but I don't know if they survived. So, the seeds are tiny, tiny, tiny. I don't know if you can even see that. Derp. Anyways, that's the seed. So those ones are too small to start in a Ziploc because the seedling would be so tiny. So those I'm going to probably do a running total. 4 6-packs of ground cherry. Okay. But tomato seeds, those are going to go into Ziploc bags in the same method that I did all of my snow peas, where it's the layers of paper, toilet paper, seeds, or no, yeah, paper leaves, and paper. So we're gonna do that in just a sec. But before we do that, quick share on how I save my seeds. Very random. I love to save seeds on pieces of cardboard. So here is over some facial masks shit. I don't know. But there, on that side, what you do is you just smear it with the tomato caviar, and it's a little goopy, and you leave it you can either put it in your dehydrator on low to speed it up, but I just put it in like a sunny spot because it dries up over a day. And I'm gonna start these off, but I mean, you can see these are bits of tomato, but you can see just how many seeds are on here. Like, it is just a ton. So what I'll do is cut these apart. And then those, actually, I have bigger bags, so I might just cut it down and start it all in one. Because basically you just wet it down and you keep wetting it down until the paper underneath gets really well saturated. I'm not even going to bother to put the toilet paper on top, because just the effect of the Ziploc will hold them into place, and it'll make it easier to pluck them off as they germinate. Because over the next couple weeks, I'll just come in every week, and anything that's germinated, I'll pull off, and I'll cut off if there gets to be any mold anywhere. I'll cut that area off, and there's just basic maintenance for that. And these are ones that primarily I will grow for myself. Because I can't guarantee they haven't cross-pollinated, but they are oxheart from some, yeah, here's some more. That's just on a piece of paper. Those are from starts, tomatoes from starts that I did 2 years ago. So these seeds are 2 years old. So I probably won't have a huge germination rate, but I only need like 5 to 100 to germinate, and then I'll probably be good. I'll probably just start with those ones, see how those go. But I'll offer these just as freebies because they're phenomenal tomatoes. And I posted a picture. Got seeds all over the place. My life is just seeds everywhere. I posted a picture of a quarter, and for perspective, imagine that is a quarter. I put it on the counter next to the tomato, and the tomato is literally sort of like this. And that's why they're called ox hearts, because they are, well, I don't know about the ox part, but the heart, they're kind of heart shaped. They're kind of they don't come in, it's like they're an outie instead of an innie belly button at the bottom. But they're delicious and prolific, and not watery, great for sauces and everything. So I'll have those too. So let's go over the basics of, ooh, that's horrible. Here, let's do this. Oh wait, I can just flip this over. Yeah, don't mind my mud mess. That's just how things is. Okay, so we're gonna go through the life cycle of a tomato, because understanding tomatoes is like fundamental to understanding how to be successful with tomatoes. And tomatoes are the most like, here's a tip and trick for this step, here's a tip and trick for this step. And none of it is 100% necessary, because I mean, honestly, in some points you can just throw a tomato seed at the ground and you'll end up with tomato. But if you follow all of the different basic processes, you'll end up with 30 tomatoes per plant, 20 off of ginormous plants. And I had one harvest that I literally had to come inside 3 times to get not barrels, bowls for tomatoes, because I just kept finding tomatoes and finding tomatoes and finding tomatoes. So this is how you get that. This is how to find, let's go ahead and make it fancy. Tomato success. Okay, this is how you do tomato success. So you just saw what seeds look like. There's one. There's a seed. That is That is what a tomato seed looks like. And that is what all of this issue is about. So here we go. So tomato seed is yay big. Let's just start with that. Okay, let's get that out of the way. So there you go. That yay every tomato seed. So what happens to a tomato as it grows? Well, imagine this is in that baggie. So it's not growing up or down, it's growing sideways because that is the space available to it inside of the baggie. Like it'll go that direction, whatever. So first you'll see a very, oh, it's great. Let's find a pen that works a little bit. There we go. It had this very tiny little tail that'll come out. So that is that first thing that comes out, that is its root. So that is down. Okay. And after this gets long, and boy, it'll get long, like it'll just keep growing off into the distance and branching off. And basically, you want to pull the seeds. Okay. That'll be about that long. It'll probably have some branching off of it, but basically that long. And then on this side, there's just something else going on there. That is the perfect time. Yeah, that totally looks like sperm, and but they're green, so maybe that'll help. There, it's all green now. Nope, that didn't help. So that's the point at which you're going to want to get a good set of tweezers ready, and I don't have any tweezers. I'll just use scissors. So imagine these are tweezers, and you'll just go on, pull the whole thing out of the Ziploc and just sort of pick at it and eventually pick it out. Then once it is in the pot, say that is the dirt. When you put it in, you want to put it in a pot that is, I usually go with, I think they're 4-inch, 3 or 4-inch. Yeah, 4-inch. So it has a good amount of growing space, because that's what about right there, size-wise, for scale size. So about 1 inch or 2 down, that's about where you're going to want it to be. But then you want to mound up and then flatten down. And you want to flatten it down pretty tight, and you want it to be just about at the top of this. And so this is at that even level, about 2 inches down. And then that you want to do into a very pronounced curve and pat it really well. And then you're going to want to water it around here. Because basically what you're trying to do is you're trying to force this to go straight up, searching for that light. Is this in focus? Like, I can never tell if it's in focus or not. Anyways, you're wanting to force this seedling to go straight up and find that sunlight, okay? And you're wanting this to, rather than getting really branchy, which is what it'll do if it has a lot of water, you want this to just plow straight down, because this is going to be your major taproot, and you want that puppy to just go straight down. So what you do once it gets into these 4-inch pots, and this is still prior to when you have to even deal with them. This is what I'll be doing with the seedlings for the CSA. But if you're deciding to start your own seeds, that's cool too. And this is a way you can do it. So you're wanting to force this to go straight down. This is the reasoning for getting this in this sort of a shape, because then you're just gently going to water. Let's do here. You're going to just gently want to water to the side so that you basically fill this whole area up without getting this like topmost ring wet, but filling up this hole here. Because again, we talked about the hydrodynamic, whatever way that the water will kind of do this. It's almost like sound waves. Like it'll go up here a little bit, but you know, I mean, it won't really move up to right here. So this will be pretty dry and this will be less dry. And, you know, depending on how successfully you do this, basically what's going to happen is the root is going to be like, well, that's what tap roots do. They're like, I got to find water. So it'll just, if it's not getting a lot of water right here, it'll just burrow straight down. And what you really want to have happen is just this to plow down, because then it'll start feathering out. So instead of having this shallow sort of wispy system up here, you have that tap root that just went down. And then, because once again, you're dealing with the seed is sort of the halfway mark. This is, you know, no matter how buried this is at this point the upper part of the plant, and this is the lower part of the plant. And the more solidly we can structure this and we can build this part of it, the more this will grow successfully. And since this is the part that we eat, it's good to really focus on that. Okay, so once this happens, okay, so it gets there and you're gonna get 2 leaves. And well, it'll be, ignore those leaves. It'll be about that big and it'll get 2 leaves on it. And the leaves are very similar. We'll do it. Artistic effects. You don't look at those leaves. There we go. So once these leaves at about, generally by about 2 inches, it has a good solid set of these 2 leaves. At this point, tomatoes look very similar to pepper plants. Their second leaves look like pepper plants, which is just basically this, where it's 2 sort of smooth, pointed, oblong leaves. And you'll notice very quickly on a happy tomato plant, as this sort of like deepens in its green color, then you're going to start to see the process of the little filaments, which I don't know if I can do this so you can actually even see it, but they start to just get a little hairy, like tomato plants, and the stem starts to get a little hairy. Now the little filaments on the leaves are good for identification, but the filaments on the leaves are the big thing to consider during this next step of the process. Okay, so it gets to that point, and then it'll grow what I term the third leaf, and that's the one that's really obvious. With tomatoes, it looks almost like a fern, and it looks fuzzy. So that's kind of roughly what it looks like. This is the point at which you have a tomato plant. You have successfully grown a tomato plant. Just a sec. So, good on you, purple star. You grew a tomato plant. So at this point, it's no longer it's no longer a start, it's a seedling, and you have to start treating it slightly differently. So when you were growing it to get it to that first 2 leaf stage, you were wanting to keep it pretty much moist all the time. You were wanting to keep liquid in there, and you had, the dry area here, but the rest of it you wanted to look wet. So at that point, you would want to have kept it in its, in the tray that it was in. Sorry, I should have mentioned that before. These go in a tray, okay? And so you put the water in the side, and then you want to keep it a low level of water always in the bottom of the tray. For tomato plants, generally about a half an inch to an inch. And you don't want to water it again until that water runs out. So you water there, it shuffles through, you water it enough that the water in the tray part of it, like here's the next tomato plant next to it, that the water in the tray is about half an inch if you tend to forget to water, a quarter of an inch if you're pretty good about watering. And then you do not water again until that water is gone, because you're wanting to force that, you're trying to force that taproot down. Once it gets to the point of getting that third leaf and these leaves on it, what that means that you have an established taproot, and it probably means it's starting to come out the bottom. So that's the point at which you want to just be sure it always has enough water available. So this is also the point you want to be sure you're not getting any water at all. Once those filaments come in, it will hold water droplets and you'll get mildewing. So you want to, just continue to be sure you're only watering to the side there. But once it gets to this point, you want to actually water this until the entire ground area is wet. So you can water up to the side here to be sure that everything's watered down. The other thing this will do is it'll start to flatten the surface that you have here. And what you'll notice at that point is the filaments that are up here have turned into, I'm going to overdraw them down here. The filaments actually will turn into little nodules. And what those are trying to do are create the shallow level offshoot roots that will collect the nutrients coming in from ground level. So those are the next thing you're wanting to really develop. So as that waters down, you want to repack it with dirt that has a mixture of coffee grounds and eggshells that are, finely ground, and good compost and that sort of thing. So that what you're wanting to have happen is as it gets pushed down, you're refilling this area until it's actually mounded up to where these second leaves are in this pot, but you still have that curve down that's leaving this area for watering. Okay, so then you have this whole area that's super stoked up on nutrients. So these offshoot roots, yeah, that's a word, offshoot roots will then spread out really nicely in this area, and then you'll have your deep taproot. You'll have your top little part here that's doing the photosynthesis stuff that it needs to do. And then you'll have this super rich area of compost and other amendments right here, forcing these little nodules to expand into your root structure. Okay? And this is still stuff that I'm doing here that you don't have to worry about unless you're wanting to do it yourself, and continuing to water here. And this is actually the point, at a certain point, you won't be able to fill up this enough to keep the water tray full. And at this point, it's more important to keep that water level up because you don't want this taproot growing anymore. You want all the energy to be going into this right now. So at this point, you're wanting the tray to be filled up. So at this point, I'm generally watering directly into the tray. and doing the same thing where it's like, fill it up, let it drain, fill it up, let it drain. And on the top, sometimes I'll just stop watering at this point on the top part, because it should have enough water going through it that it's good. So at this point, I just do a little bit of misted on kelp water type stuff to give just a little bit of moisture to the plant and some nutrients to help keep this going, and then water it at the edges. You know, whenever I fill this up, I water there just till it fills up and sort of brings that water table up a little bit. Okay, so then fast forward for a while, 2 gold stars. Guess what happened? This, it's doing this. These have gotten a little curled up and a little sad looking. Oops, it's grown out of frame. Oh my goodness. We'll bring it down to the waterline level because you've been being really good and keeping that water level right where it needs to be. And so you have a plant that's starting to do this kind of stuff. Okay, so you can imagine that suddenly it'll shoot up. It's just like toddlers. Like, you give them the right stuff, you give them the right amount of stuff at the right time, and suddenly they're like 10 feet tall. So tomato plants are basically the same way. You've developed the taproot, you've gotten these to force their way out, and then suddenly it goes from this to this in like a matter of minutes. And it's like, oh my gosh, it's a tomato plant. And the biggest sign to look for, the absolute critical thing to look for with when the tomato plants are ready to go from this step to the next step, when that they'll be hardy enough to go to the next step in the process, is these leaves, which I call the first leaves. They start to look real sad. They just start to look, they might even fall off on their own. But, you know, just watch for those. They'll either start to yellow or they'll start to shrivel or whatever. Be sure you're not damaging them when you're doing your pile of stuff here, because you can overestimate your plants if you just accidentally knock these off. Don't be worried if you accidentally do knock them off. There are other ways to tell, but just the simplest is to watch the first leaves. And as soon as those ones look like junk, then it is time to, let's see if I have another blank page. I'll just do it on my notes right here. Okay, so to refresh your memory, you have a plant that is pretty much mounded up to the top. The 2 little first leaves are right there, and it is grown up, and it has gotten to, let's say, if it's a 4-inch pot, it's gotten to about 4 to 6 inches of foliage, 4 to 6 inches above those first leaves, which is about where you're mounded to. This is the point at which they go, you have 2 options. It can either stay in here, and you can plant them early and mulch them, or you can take them home and, or you can, okay. Drink water. I need to drink water. Okay. So this is the stage at which I'm going to first make the tomatoes available. And it's going to be one of those situations where each one is going to be, it'll probably be that each one at this point will be $1, because this is the point at which you can keep them alive in this pot until they're ready to go in the ground. Because this will probably be about a week or 2 before they are like, they can legit go into the ground. And so you can either take them home at this point and they'll be a little cheaper than after in the next step, which will be about a month or 2 later, which will be like prime time to put them into the ground. And at that point, they'll probably be more, I don't know. I haven't totally figured it out yet. But so these tomatoes are good to go. So what my next step with these tomatoes, because I wouldn't put them in the ground at this point, I would transplant them into either a 6-inch pot, round, or circular. Doesn't super matter. But what we're attempting to do at this point is to expand this area, because all of the filaments and everything, let's see that, all the filaments that grow on that can be forced into root structure like this. And that's going to be really, really important later. So what I would do, what I do is the pot is about a third bigger to twice as big, so 30 to 50% bigger pot. I'm probably going to do circular for a lot of them just because that is, I have a lot of those. And so cross section you're looking at here, you're not wanting to grow that taproot at this point. You want to sort of actually stunt the growth of the taproot, and you're going to try to turn more area into that shallow root structure. So what you want to do is fill about, let's say this is like 4 inches, so this is 8 inches. You want to do about 2 inches. Oh my goodness. Okay, 4 inches, 8 inches, around 2 to 3 inches of dirt in the circular pot. There we go. Then you're going to take this out, and it's going to go in here, and you just set it right in the center there. Okay. So what you're looking at this point is you're about 2 inches. So this is super poorly done to scale. Sorry about that. So the top of the dirt would be 2 inches below the bottom. So basically this just below that second set of leaves would hit right there. And we're going to go through that same process. Let's do it a little bigger. So 2 inches of dirt out of the container, obviously. I keep drawing that like so badly out of scale. I don't know why. There, cross hatch it. So basically you have your deep taproot here. So it has a little room to grow down in this area, but that's not really what you're trying to do at this point. What you're trying to do is build up the soil level so that you're getting those additional taproots. So here's the tomato plant. Let's say there's the foliage. There is the mound that was there, and here are those second leaves. When those go in, those second leaves come off. Even if they look healthy when this actually happens, those come off, and you immediately bury it all the way up to there, and then of course fill in this area so that you can do that same triangle edge watering. You fill all that in. Ooh, before I go on, right here, I do my breakfast blend, which is eggshells and coffee, and you fill that in right in there. At this stage, you do maybe half a cup, and you just sprinkle it in the area that this sets down on. Then you put that in, then you mound it up after breaking those off just to right under there. And then as this grows up, you continue to fill it in until it is again above that line. And you just break off foliage as you need to go as it develops up here. you'll actually notice as this is happening that it will die off more and more, and you just take off the ones that are dying off, and then you fill it up to that point, and you again just keep it so that you can kind of do that. This is the point at which it's good to go outside. Generally speaking, I like to keep it on cement, possibly against a wall or something, but plenty of sun and everything. So mounding it up like this not only is going to force this to go up, for the foliage to keep growing up, but it's going to cause those long roots that you're wanting to build up here. Okay. So this moves on and it continues to grow and everything. This is the point at which you need to start looking for suckers, which are, imagine this is the major stem of your plant, and you have the offshoot limb, and those are very structurally obvious. And then you get a start going in basically whatever the opposite of an armpit is. Those are called suckers. And basically with tomato plants, because when they're really happy and they're really healthy, like these plants are going to be, they're like, oh, I'm going to make another one. And it's really stupid because they shouldn't, and they don't really need to, and all you end up is a bushy plant that doesn't have much fruit, because these secondary plants will grow off. You can, in fact, if you break these off carefully, put them into a thing of dirt or into like a 6-cell and grow another tomato plant, because everything from here to here will turn into root structure, and then that'll grow and you'll have another thing. But basically you should be able to wiggle it a little bit forward and backwards, and it should pop right off. But you want to be careful to keep those off, because they will just draw nutrients away from your plant, and then you're just going to throw it away or mulch it or whatever anyways. So might as well get those going. So at this point, you're being sure it's staying wet. I usually put them in a big like crate, so that the water level is actually kept up to about there, because you're just trying to force that taproot to not grow anymore, but to stay healthy. But taproots won't grow if they have plenty of water, so you're just trying to keep that good for the taproot, and to allow this to grow while this roots out. So basically at any point past the I usually like to do the 3rd or 4th major row. And as you're looking at the tomato plants, the different rows become so much more obvious. So you got your first set, and then there's going to be a second set, and then there's going to be a third set. Generally speaking, by the time it gets to the second set, you can start watching really closely the weather as to whether or not it's ready to go outside or not. If it's not, just keep it inside. Keep it bottom watered, but don't add any nutrients or anything, because you kind of want to slow it down at this point. If it looks like it's going to be a while, take it out of the water bath and put it in a super sunny location, and that will sort of trick it into thinking that a dry spell is going on. So it'll start producing buds, which you should pinch off, but it won't grow as much. Because then that's actually something you want to do right before you put it in the ground, because if it buds, the buds are picked off fine, but mostly you want it to think, oh, it's dry, and then plant it, water the ever-loving crap out of it, and then this taproot will just... So one more picture. Let's try to find one more blank piece of paper somewhere. I don't know if there is one. The book's pretty full. Here, I could just do it in this little blank area. So again, we went from that, we went to that. Now we're in a whatever, couple gallon pot. And at this point, it's mounded up pretty much to the top. You've taken it out of the water bath, so it's thinking, oh my goodness, it's in a dry spell. The plant is about, that does not look like a tomato plant, but okay, so the plant's about right there. That's about an 8-inch pot. So 12-inch, I would say, right around it, 12-inch. That's when you're good to go to put it in the ground. I don't know when I have it on my calendar to put it in the, oh, I can look at it. Derp to derp, I will check this because it will say, oh, I should look on the chart. That's more a quick version. Sorry, and I'm not seeing what I need to see. That's the chart I'm looking for. There we go. So tomatoes come out April 30th. So these guys that I'm starting today should be available April 30th. And I think that's Mother's Day or whatever. So mid-May, I think. That's the date I have for, let's see. I will be doing it Sunday, May 2nd, planting tomatoes, peppers, and eggplants. So that will happen unless it looks really nasty out. But by May, it should probably be pretty good. Should be pretty good. So yeah, let's do this last illustration because I need to go do dinner and then I will plant some stuff. Okay, so this is potentially the second. This is what will be available at the early part of May to take home to plant. And this part might be the weirdest part, but just go with me here. So this is a cross section of land. Okay. And I will actually do it as an edging to my lawn. So imagine this is lawn, and I'll do that same thing where I'll cut straight down about 6 inches. Because what that does is it breaks this line. And so, yeah, it just makes it easier to keep grass out of the way. Anyways, so about 6 inches down, 6 to 8 inches-ish. And then I'll do an angle like that. So let's say this is 8 inches, this is 6 inches, and this is about a 45-degree angle. And then edge it so it goes straight up this way. And whatever not Pavlovian, whatever math that is, that's how you do it. So what you're looking at is this corner fits down here. Okay. First, you're going to put in a good bit of that coffee blend, the coffee and eggshell, because that will help with your calcium deficiency, which is quite often what causes the yellowing in the leaves. And it also helps with acidity and the overall health and vitality of the plant. So when it's in there, the general math on it is that it'll sort of sit right in here, okay? And so let's just draw the basic geometry of the plant in so you can see where we're at. Here's that seed, okay? And here's that taproot that we force down and is sitting right there. And then here are all those built up shallow roots that happened through that piling on and removing the leaves and everything. So that's the structure there. And then right here, you have the plant that is going up. See where that line is. See where it barely peaks above? That is actually important. It's probably going to rest on here. That's not a problem. I'm just keeping it in line so that you can see the correlation. So what you're going to want to do as soon as that happens is remove that next layer of leaves. If that is generally at this point, that'll be the second or third layer of leaves that happens. So that'll put you at about right there on the plant, okay? So remove everything below that. And as you're doing it, whenever you're handling the stem, you're wanting to retain the integrity of as many of those filaments as possible so that they can continue to turn into these shallow roots. So don't clutch the bottom part of this. If you need to hold a part of it, hold it gently above the set of leaves, because then that'll leave as little damage as possible. So again, just bend those, break them off, and then you're going to want to fill basically with dirt like that. So you see it's kind of almost to ground level, but not quite. Okay. And this is important that you get this at the right height, because basically what you're doing is you're laying this section out to be this really nice length of this shallow web work of rooting that of course you're going to do another layer and fill it up and another layer and fill it up as this bends up towards the sun. Well, so you have this great root work building up and building up and building up. This tomato, which is a vine, will just bend and go directly towards the sun. And then what are you looking at? You're looking at a taproot right here. Okay. So what you want to do is, I guess I made that a little too high. That is your, okay, that's your grass line. You fill this area here in the same way as that, you fill this in here the same way you filled in the corners of the pot. And if you look in a little bit of perspective, you're going to have tomato plants that are basically growing up like this into the distance. Okay, so you fill this whole space because it's basically planted as a trough. This angle is a trough that goes forwards and backwards into the distance. So you fill this up, and then I take planter, the like leftover bags from potting soil, and I'll cover the areas and then cover onto the grass. Okay, so you're looking at the cross section. So basically that part is covered with bags in the back. And what that does is it, as this moisture soaks in and everything, it's heated up. And this also helps to keep the grass down from where the tomato plants are. Further, you can put, I wouldn't put soil because the grass will try to grow into it, but I will throw down bamboo clippings and leaves and, you know, whatever on top of this to just help weight it, and it also keeps this kind of warm and humid. Then what you're going to want to do is, once you put that tarp down, your plants are going to be about that big, okay, when the tarp goes down. And you don't want to have it right up to against the root. Let's say you're looking at the top, here's the bag, and here's the plant coming out. But you know the plant goes to about right there. And here's where it gets green, okay? So as this bends up and reaches for the sky, that taproot's just gonna go zhunk and hit that water table. And that's why you want to do this kind of flood soak watering, because that water pulls down and it will naturally just guide that taproot along with it until it gets down to the water table, which I am blessed with a very shallow water table. I'm just above the 100-year flood zone. So once that hits that water table, this is going to go, fuck yeah, and just grow up all over the place. And then all you do is, as soon as, because you want a fruitful plant, you do, which is AKA a flowerful plant. You do not want an herbaceous plant or a leafy plant. So we're back to that whole concept of growing flowers, growing herbs. The tomato, consider more of a flower in the way that you grow it, because you're wanting to encourage that flowering to happen. You're not wanting that greenery to happen. That's why you snap off the suckers. And that is why you do this initial watering and then you don't do anything. You do not touch these plants other than looking for suckers. That's the only thing you look for, because they're going to go a little bonkers during this point. You also want to watch for stress blossoms, because repotting like this and it's suddenly outside and blah blah blah, they might freak out and be like, oh hey, I need to flower, and you want to pinch those off immediately. So I guess, yeah, you don't water them again, but you check for suckers and you check for flowers, because you definitely don't want those to come out until at least another, you never want suckers, but you definitely don't want flowers to come out at least for a couple weeks, because you're just going to have stress flowers and you're not going to get that much of a crop out of the plant, because it's going to put all of that energy that it should be putting into that taproot into flowers. And you want all that energy to go into the taproot at this point, because that's what's going to give you those lovely, lovely, lovely tomatoes. So for the first month, no watering, watch your suckers, pull off flowers, and you can just drop them. Like, it doesn't even matter. You can just drop them right where they are. Then once that plant, because it'll start, branching off and everything and getting leaves on it and getting bigger and fluffier and everything. Oh God, that looks so sad. That does not look tomatoey at all. But anyways, okay, that's a little better. As that gets bigger, you know that taproot is there. You know that is there. At this point, you know that grass is kind of been driven off because of the plastic, and you're not going to have much in the way of jumpers going that way. Once that starts to grow up, you're going to want to, not on the grass side of it, but you can move all of that mulchy kind of stuff over to this side, and then fill this area up. And you're looking at it like that on the upper view and this on the side view. Break off leaves again as possible. And you want to mound it up to the top of the bend, because that is the way you're going to get the strongest structure upwise. And so as you do that, about a month after, you can either put the gate on right when you repot it like this, or a month later when you put this out. It's up to you. It's also up to you. I mean, if you're doing the circular cage style ones, the ones that look kind of like this, the sooner the better, because these are really harsh and difficult to get a lot of the smaller leaves around. But I'm going to be doing stick and twine trellising, so that isn't going to happen until I do this, because then I'll really know where the plants are and where they want to go directly up from. That's the way to get the strongest root on that. So that is that. And then so you water it, and this is trough watering, so you can just take off one of the tarps in the middle, and you just keep water going into it. Like it's once a month, so quite often I will just put my hose, like as the drip system is going, as the soaker hoses are going, I'll just put an open hose that's like half drip or whatever, like not on full soaker, but half drip, because you want to give it time to fill up, and just let it go for half hour, 45 minutes, an hour, depending on what seems like, until it just turns into muck, like until that area just turns into muck. Just leave it going. I mean, until it's spilling over, it's not going to be a problem. Then put the plastic back down, and then fill it with the compost, and you can do more eggshell at this point, or coffee at this point. Just fill that in until it things up, goes trellis, and then pretty much at that point you're just waiting for suckers. You can leave flowers on at this point, because this is the point at which you have the most solid plant you're going to get, so you have the best chance for the most tomatoes. That soaking will cause that taproot to just bury itself into that water table. Yeah, and then so at this point, just watch the leaves, and watch the tomato plants, tomato flowers. You want the tomato flowers to be looking healthy and hardy, but you want your leaves to look kind of sad and pathetic. And you don't water again until you're like, am I killing it? Like, dude, I'm killing my plant. Like, this is bad. That's the point at which you water it again. You just go through the same thing of just watering that trough until it's just ridiculous, and then covering it back up again. Because what you're basically trying to do is stress the plant out enough that it's doing that same thing when you repotted it, but now it's like 5 times as big. So it'll do that same thing only 5 times, 10 times, 20 times as much. Or it's like, oh crap, I better make babies, because this is harsh. Tomatoes like to be harshly dealt with past a certain point. And so if you water it too much, you're going to get a really nice bushy looking plant, especially if you don't pull the suckers out regularly. You're going to end up with a beautiful, bushy, healthy looking plant with no tomatoes. Some of the most pathetic looking, ragged ass tomato plants I've ever grown have had the most amazing tomatoes on it. So yeah, I mean, it's really important to understand the function of the tomato plant in order to be able to grow this really, I mean, there's like multi-layers to how each section is developed. And taking this home and turning it into that is a lot easier than starting from this. But hopefully, with that very brief and exhausting explanation, you too could turn this into like 30 to 50 tomatoes and 100 generations of tomatoes. So, okay, cool. Happy growing. It's time for soup. So I think I've done my explaining for the day. I hope you've had fun. I hope you have enjoyed. Oh, there I am behind the. Hi. I hope you've had fun. I hope you enjoyed this explanation. I hope you can grow a bazillion tomatoes this year. And yeah, if you have any questions about what did we talk about today, tomatoes or beans or favas, like ask anything about fava beans because oh my goodness. Um, but yeah, have fun this year growing and harvesting, and yeah, let's grow together. See you on the flip side. I think I think we're done here.